He only glanced back at the drilling pipe, then suddenly grew tense. Crouching down, Caleb reached out in fear, his trembling fingers feeling along the cracks of the pipe. When he pulled his hand back, his fingertips were covered with wet mud. Before he could even react, more mud seeped out from the wellhead. This left everyone completely stunned.
What are you?
Warning.
It's not stop.
Jason, are you seeing this?
Tell you to do anything!
The control room immediately shut down the annular preventer. As the gate in the pipe closed, the surging mud behind it was instantly trapped. At this moment, the people on the platform were panicking and fleeing in all directions. Knocked down by the mud, Caleb hurriedly got back on his feet and quickly asked the control room what to do. Jason pointed into the distance, telling Caleb to open the drill pipe's diversion valve to release the pressure. Without hesitation, Caleb rushed through the shower of mud and quickly turned the valve. That action successfully stopped the mud from gushing out. But no one could have imagined this was only the beginning of a nightmare disaster. 2 days earlier, a drilling team arrived at the heliport, ready to board a helicopter to the offshore Deepwater Horizon oil platform. Before disaster strikes, everything around always seems unnervingly calm. Inside the helicopter cabin, everyone was laughing and chatting. After all, this was just their routine work. Some newcomers even marveled that the drilling platform looked like a massive ship, calling it nothing short of an industrial miracle. Not long after, the helicopter landed safely on the platform's helipad. Jimmy, the person in charge of the rig, got off and noticed that the logging team was preparing to leave. He asked if the well had been completed, but the other party avoided giving a direct answer, as if they had something difficult to say. Without getting a clear response, Jimmy and Mike headed straight for the control room. Mike, the chief electrician, immediately carried out a routine inspection. The instruments showed everything was normal, and the platform's power systems were running smoothly. However, not far from the platform, there was a mud recovery vessel. Its presence meant the preliminary well work was supposedly finished. But Jimmy had still not received the cement test results, which meant someone had deliberately skipped the inspection in order to start work early. Because of this, Mike hurried to the central work area to ask around, but all the drillers said they had never done any cement testing. When he returned to ask Jason in the control room, he learned that the British petroleum supervisors had paid the logging team to leave early. Mike reported this to Jimmy, and they decided to confront the BP people together. On the way, Mike habitually tossed a coin into the sea. As the coin sank beneath the waves, hidden turbulence below was already building. Soon, Mike and Jimmy met with the BP supervisors. The rig had been leased by BP, and their schedule had already been delayed by nearly 50 days, with over $50 million in extra costs. So in order to catch up, they had skipped the inspection steps. But Jimmy firmly refused because even if BP was paying, he still had to ensure the safety of every worker on the platform. So, at Jimmy's insistence, Vidrine had no choice but to agree to conduct another pressure test. Following instructions, the platform's direction was adjusted. As Jason closed the annular preventer, the subsea pipe gradually shut, and the mud inside began to move at high speed. Watching the negative pressure test gauges, Vidrine grew nervous, knowing if something went wrong it could cost tens of millions more. After waiting a few minutes, the pressure reading changed, settling around 100. That was about 100 pounds per square inch, which counted as safe. But just as they thought everything was fine, more bubbles surfaced from the seabed, and the gauge suddenly shot up to nearly 500, with no sign of stopping. As bubbles kept rising, the gauge jumped from 450 to 900. Then within seconds, it crossed the red line to 1,395. The result was obvious. The pressure had far exceeded safety limits. Yet Vidrine disagreed, saying it made no sense that with such high pressure, not a drop of mud was coming from the drill pipe. Jimmy and Mike couldn't immediately explain the reason either. Vidrine sketched a diagram, explaining that maybe only one pocket of pressure was stuck near the preventer, pressing against the sensor, rather than the entire pipe being overloaded. That would explain why the readings spiked without mud flowing out. He suggested running another pressure test on the kill line running through the drill pipe to confirm. If the readings matched, it would mean real pressure, but if the kill line showed nothing, then it was just a faulty sensor. Vidrine's analysis made some sense, and for the moment, Jimmy and Mike couldn't find any reason to refute it. No one truly knew what was happening on the seabed. All they had was the data, so Jimmy reluctantly allowed Vidrine's second test. Meanwhile, the seabed activity grew more violent as mud mixed with shattered rock surged upward. The kill line test first showed around 500, but soon debris completely blocked a section of the pipe, and the gauge instantly dropped to 0. That was exactly the result Vidrine wanted. But no one realized that while the numbers looked good, the cause behind them was terrifying. Jimmy soon got the call that the kill line pressure was 0. Though he felt uneasy, the data was in front of him, so he agreed to proceed. With Jimmy's approval, Jason reopened the annular preventer. The trapped mud immediately surged upward. The control room began diverting mud, drawing out the drilling fluid used for pressure stabilization. With that, the last line of defense was opened. Within minutes, the pressure soared into the red zone again, and Jason saw it pass 2,300, forcing him to halt the mud transfer. As everyone puzzled over the situation, Caleb outside noticed something was wrong, and that was the moment leading to the opening scene. From this point on, the deep sea disaster began to evolve into a true hell. Though the blowout was quickly contained, the seabed released even greater energy, and the annular preventer shattered under the high-pressure rock impacts. The unstoppable flow of mud rushed straight through the pipes into the diversion chamber. Hearing strange noises, workers turned toward the valve. The very next second, mud burst out from the cracks. Seeing the alarm, Andrea thought it was just a routine error and didn't feel too nervous. But when she made the call, no one had time to answer because they were all desperately trying to close the valves. The experienced worker kept shouting for everyone to run because he knew that what was coming next was a disaster, and the pressure gauge shooting past 4,000 proved he was not wrong. Jason ordered them to shut the second blowout preventer, but under this kind of pressure, it could only buy them a little time. Blasted by mud once again, Caleb and the others used this moment to quickly escape the scene. By now, the seabed activity had completely erupted, and the workers in the diversion chamber were the first to feel the roar of the ocean. In such high-pressure mud flow, Caleb could not carry out any rescue measures. After several attempts, he found that the raging current was like a solid wall, while rocks from the seabed shot out in every direction, like bullets. Seeing this, Jason quickly called for Caleb to leave the site. At this moment, the distant mud recovery vessel finally realized that an accident had occurred on the platform, and when someone came to the deck to check the situation with binoculars, a pelican covered in crude oil suddenly flew into the wheelhouse. Seeing this scene, everyone was completely stunned. Back on the platform, the center was already in complete chaos, with mud surging and destroying everything around it. Jason shouted to cut the pipe, but the worker was instantly knocked to the ground by the shockwave.
I'm gonna make sure
Go right now!
Mike, who was video calling with his wife, heard the noise and froze in confusion. Vidrine, having narrowly avoided disaster, now stood in complete shock, his mind blank. Because the blowout carried large amounts of crude oil, the vapors flooded into the platform's intake vents, then spread through pipelines into the engines. This caused the thrusters to suddenly accelerate, shifting the platform's position. But since the pipe had not been cut, the rig was still connected straight to the seabed, and once the platform shifted, the pipe bent. And when the pipe bent, cracks widened, and the escaping pressure only grew worse. Seeing the screens filled with error alarms, Andrea stepped out of the power room, and the sight instantly left her stunned. She rushed back inside to call for help.
Mayday, 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 this is...
We've had a mass casualty explosion. We need assistance immediately.
motor vessel came in base. Deepwater Horizon has exploded and is on fire.
Soon the Coast Guard received the distress signal and immediately checked the explosion images through satellite. The commander immediately coordinated nearby rescue units to respond, but they were far out at sea, and even a helicopter would take more than half an hour to reach them. let alone a firefighting vessel. By now, the drilling platform was already engulfed in flames. Not far away, the mud recovery vessel brought out its limited rescue equipment and sent personnel with lifeboats to begin the rescue immediately. Severely injured, Jimmy slowly regained consciousness, put on his clothes, and staggered outside, where he happened to see Mike inside searching for the trapped workers. Although Mike was struck by a door during the explosion, he did not suffer any serious injuries. Jimmy told Mike to take him to the control room because with his highest level authority, he had to cut off the drill pipe. On the way, they encountered more trapped workers, and during the rescues, explosions kept erupting until the entire platform lost power. Fortunately, they managed to save the workers. Vidrine stood there in complete shock, staring at the apocalyptic scene before him, not knowing which way to run. He walked into the control room, but everyone inside just looked at each other, speechless. At the lifeboats, the first group of workers was organizing to board. But above their heads, the crane had gone out of control, repeatedly smashing against the iron frame. And if it fell, everyone in the lifeboat would be doomed. To stop it, the operator braved the flames and climbed into the crane's cab. Because of the crushing weight, the entire axle was nearly locked, and the operator used every ounce of his strength to steady it. Yet just as the workers below cheered, his fate was sealed in an instant. Meanwhile, Mike finally brought Jimmy into the control room. Learning that Vidrine was also inside, the nearly blind Jimmy angrily confronted him.
Get your ass on the lifeboats.
After Vidrine left, Jimmy had someone guide him to press the pipe cutting button. With the push of the button, two massive blades inside the drill pipe extended outward. When the attempt to cut failed, the others wanted to leave, but Jimmy insisted on restoring power, believing it was the only way to keep the platform steady. So Mike and Caleb ran through the flames toward the power room. Outside, sparks flew everywhere, the air itself seemed to burn, and a sudden fireball nearly ended their lives right there. Inside the power room, following the emergency manual, Mike managed to restore electricity to the platform. Lights flickered back on, and the power systems returned, temporarily stabilizing the platform's drift. But in the face of this disaster, it was nothing more than a drop in the ocean. Soon after, Mike and Caleb were hit by another explosion. When Jimmy and the others came outside, the last remaining lifeboat was already full and had left the platform. The platform, still exploding without end, wouldn't last long before turning into scrap metal. Mike hurriedly organized the remaining workers to open an inflatable raft, telling everyone else to get on first while he would stay behind. But a sudden explosion threw both him and Andrea aside. The worker controlling the descent was instantly engulfed by flames, and in a panic he leapt into the sea while the inflatable raft dropped down to the surface. But the sea around them was burning, and jumping straight down meant almost certain death. For this, Mike pulled Andrea to move to higher ground, because he knew they had to jump from a higher place to reach a safe spot. Soon they reached the helipad, and behind them the drilling platform loomed like a burning volcano of steel, ready to consume them at any moment. Mike shifted Andrea's attention while helping her put on the life jacket. But when she froze in fear and refused to jump, Mike had no choice but to push her. Then Mike also jumped into the sea and found Andrea. Rescue boats arrived just in time to pull them out. On the nearby mud recovery vessel, Jimmy called out the names one by one, but a few were never answered. Only after Mike and Andrea climbed aboard did a rescue helicopter arrive to carry away the severely injured. By then, the drilling platform had completely turned into an inferno. Later, Mike and the others were brought back to the city, their hearts still haunted by the terror of what they had endured. Soon, his wife and daughter arrived at the hotel, and no matter what, surviving was already a blessing. As Mike's family slowly walked into the lobby, Andrea embraced him tightly. Nearby, Caleb's family showed the same look of relief at surviving. At the door, seeing the wounded Jimmy, Mike and his family hugged him in turn before saying goodbye. This film is based on a true story. The disaster claimed the lives of 11 workers. The blowout lasted for 87 days, and an estimated 210 million gallons of oil spilled into the Gulf of Mexico. It remains the most severe oil disaster in American history.